You do not need to be evil to get used. You do not need to be stupid to fall for it. And you do not need to ignore the obvious. You just need the right kind of language placed in your mouth at the exact moment you are vulnerable. In 2026, the most dangerous manipulation is not some dramatic cult ritual. It is a polished story you repeat to yourself while your paycheck shrinks, your rent rises, and your job gets automated by an algorithm that never sleeps. This is not financial advice. This is financial education. And what I am about to tell you will feel uncomfortable because it strips the comforting myths right off the table. The script people tell you is that money rewards merit. Work hard, learn skills, invest wisely, and the system will notice. But behind the curtain, the system does not reward merit. It rewards control. And control is almost always achieved through one thing that sounds harmless, even motivational, even respectable: persuasion, influence, selling, calling it whatever you want as long as it gets you to cooperate. This whole idea is old, much older than Wall Street. There is a classic war manual of mind games and social leverage that many people treat like folklore. It is called The Strategy of Qui Coctu, the kind of book that reads like a lesson about communication and human nature until you realize what it really trains: not how to be a good person, how to bend outcomes. And here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. In modern life, the people who win are rarely the ones who are smartest. They are the ones who can get others to move without feeling like they are being moved. They can make you do the work. They can make you chase the risk. They can make you pay for your own trap. You think this is conspiracy. It is not. It is mechanism. And in 2026, the mechanism is everywhere. Let me connect it to your day, not some ancient story you cannot verify. In the past, manipulation required charisma and face-to-face meetings. In 2026, it only requires distribution. AI can analyze your behavior, your posts, your purchase history, and your anxieties. Then it can deliver persuasion at the exact speed and tone that keeps you engaged. You are not just being convinced, you are being targeted. Pattern interrupt. Ask yourself a simple question. Why does your bank send you reassuring messages at the same time you are being charged higher fees, reduced benefits, and worse loan terms? The message is not for your comfort, it is for your compliance, and compliance keeps the system stable for the people who already own it. In this video, I want to do three things. First, I want you to understand persuasion as a financial engine, not a social skill. Second, I want you to see how that engine is amplified by AI in hiring, investing, housing, and retirement. Third, I want you to take one step toward protecting yourself, because knowing how the trick works is the beginning of escape. Now we will start with the simplest truth that feels cruel because it makes you responsible for your own delusion. Persuasion is selling, always, even when you are the one doing it to yourself. When you believe you are just communicating, you are probably negotiating your own surrender. Think about the last job interview you had, or the last time you applied for a mortgage, or the last time you tried to convince yourself that this year will be different. There is a script, there is a story you repeat. There are words that soften fear. And fear is where money is extracted. The persuasion manual I am referencing does not talk like a therapist. It talks like a battlefield instructor. It says the world is a chessboard, and the pieces you think are separate are actually connected. Employees become pieces, customers become pieces, partners become pieces, even your attention becomes a piece. In ancient times, this was about court politics. In modern times, it is about consumer spending, employment pipelines, and capital markets. The chessboard did not change. The tools did. You already know the tools: social media, advertising, brand partnerships, sponsored content, influencers selling mindset. In 2026, the tools also include automated customer service that sounds human, AI-generated ads that look like a personal recommendation, and job listings that promise growth while quietly training a machine to replace you. And that is why the most toxic persuasion is the one that sounds like opportunity. Pattern interrupt. Remember when everyone told you to learn to code back around 2020? It sounded empowering. It sounded like escape. But in 2026, many entry-level coding tasks are being done by AI systems that do not need a salary, do not need healthcare, and do not get tired. The message that promised you mobility became a funnel. It funneled you into preparation that is now partly automated. So you kept doing what you were told, while the rules changed under your feet. That is not bad luck. That is leverage. Now let's go deeper. The reason persuasion works is not because humans are weak. It is because humans have predictable reactions when they are uncertain. When you are uncertain, you want a narrative. When you want a narrative, you accept an authority voice. When you accept an authority voice, you stop analyzing. This is why the best persuaders do not flood you with facts. They control the flow. The old manual emphasizes something that modern people ignore because it sounds cynical. It argues that you should understand people by observing, but not in the way therapists say it: observing as in mapping, observing as in preparing an outcome. The manual also says something else that should make you uneasy. It suggests that the most important strategic material can be placed at the end, because the average reader is seduced by the early, exciting parts. They feel like they learned everything quickly. Then they stop. They brag about what they understood, and they miss the core. Now translate that into finance in 2026. You see it in every get-rich-quick story online. The early part gives you hope. The middle part gives you instructions that mostly benefit the seller. The end part, the part that matters, is never delivered in full, or it is delivered in a way that you have to pay for again and again. You are not just watching content, you are consuming an experience designed to condition your behavior. And this conditioning is becoming a business model. Pattern interrupt. Consider the creator economy. You were told that being an independent creator would be freedom. In reality, most creators make $0 or near zero, and they work constant hours to keep the platform rewards alive. Meanwhile, the platform extracts attention and sells advertising. The freedom story is not wrong because of hope. It is wrong because it hides the ownership structure. In 2026, the platforms and the ad networks own the distribution. Most creators own nothing but their time. Persuasion is used to sell you the illusion that your effort will be enough. It rarely is. Now let's connect the persuasion engine to the Federal Reserve, because this part matters to the survival math of ordinary people. The Fed does not control inflation like a thermostat. It controls interest rates and financial conditions. In plain terms, when rates are high, borrowing costs rise, asset prices often wobble, and ordinary people feel it through mortgages, credit cards, student loans, and business expansion. But you already know the problem you feel daily. Real purchasing power never fully returns. Even when official inflation numbers improve, your salary does not jump backward into the years you lost. Many households in the United States and across the developed world experienced a permanent squeeze. The price level rose faster than wages. The persuasive narrative you were given was that inflation would be temporary. But data from Federal Reserve research on real income and inflation shows that households do not experience inflation as a neat chart. They experience it as groceries, insurance, fuel, rent, and healthcare. And once you understand persuasion as control, the narrative becomes obvious. If you can get people to accept a story that they are fine, then they are less likely to change behavior in ways that disrupt the system. So the system keeps you busy. It tells you to refinance, to chase a promotion, to pick up a side hustle. Then it tells you to invest for the long term. Meanwhile, housing prices detached from wages so thoroughly that a generation is being trained to rent indefinitely. In the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia, affordability has become structural, not temporary. There are reasons like constrained supply, higher construction costs, and investor demand, but the outcome is what matters to you. You cannot outwork a housing math problem forever. Persuasion disguises the math as personal failure, and personal failure is profitable for the lenders and the landlords because it keeps you trying while they collect. You have probably seen it in your own life. You save aggressively, but the down payment keeps slipping away. You cut expenses, but insurance rises. You wait for a better market, but the interest rate you qualify for keeps your dream locked behind a higher monthly payment. So you take the deal anyway, not because you want it, because the story of missing out triggers urgency. That is not an accident. That is human psychology used as a lever. Now, I want to give you a micro story, because abstractions do not bleed, people do. Picture a 32-year-old nurse named David. He works nights. He does not have time to optimize his life. He does not have the luxury of reading 10 finance books before breakfast. He just wants stability. David watches a social media clip where a confident stranger says that if you are disciplined, you can build wealth. The clip is short. It feels honest. It uses normal words. It makes David feel like he is one decision away from getting his life back. Then the clip points him toward an app, a course, or a newsletter that promises a clear path. David pays $200, then another amount, then schedules a call. During the call, he hears a pitch that sounds like a friend. The pitch never says this will make you money. It says something worse. It says you can learn strategy. Strategy is vague. Strategy is safe for the seller, but it steers David into a cycle of repeated purchases and repeated effort. Meanwhile, his landlord raises rent. His insurance renews at a higher rate. The interest on his credit card accrues. And David is now training himself to believe that his struggle is because he did not follow instructions well enough, not because the system is taking a bite out of his cash flow every month. And here is the darkest part. David is not lazy. David is not stupid. David is being guided by persuasion designed to keep him paying. They knew he would want hope, so they sold him hope. Now let's go even darker, because you deserve the full picture. In the persuasion manual, there is an idea. Persuade by matching to the person. Loud to one kind, quiet to another. Big moves to big egos, small moves to cautious hearts. The manual implies that people are not identical targets. They are different emotional structures. Modern finance does the same thing at scale. AI does it better than you can imagine. Your phone already knows your habits. Your browsing already knows your preferences. Your credit profile already knows your limits. When an institution asks you to sign up, it does not just offer a product. It offers a tailored psychological permission slip. It tells you that you are an exception, that you are responsible, that the risk is manageable, that you are different. And that story is how the money moves. Money moves upward too. The old manual makes a brutal statement. Most wealth behaves like it flows to higher levels and stays there. In modern terms, that flow shows up as capital concentrating at the top. Data on wealth distribution in the United States consistently shows that the top 1% owns a larger share of wealth than earlier decades, and the top households benefit from asset price growth, dividends, and tax advantages. That is not a feeling, that is math. And when wealth concentrates, the persuasion changes. The top actors do not need to shout as much. They need to manage narratives. They need to influence regulation, coverage, and political outcomes. They need to keep the middle class believing the game is fair enough to keep playing. This is why you see the stock market hitting highs while everyday people feel wrecked. The disconnect is not confusion. It is separation. When asset prices rise, the people who own assets benefit. When wages do not rise, people without assets suffer. The persuasion tells you to focus on broad indices and long-term averages, which are true in aggregate and brutal in personal reality. Cliffhanger into the next part. And now you are going to see how persuasion becomes engineering when it intersects with retirement and debt. Because once the system has you chasing small wins, it can quietly shift your future. Retirement is where persuasion becomes a slow extraction process. Pension underfunding, delayed Social Security claims, rising healthcare costs, and aging populations create pressure. The official guidance often sounds responsible. It does not feel like a trap. But the timeline is unforgiving. When you push retirement ages higher, you extend the working period for people who can least afford long delays. Meanwhile, the very same economy that asks you to work longer continues to transfer wealth to those with diversified assets. In the Persuasion Manual, the goal is not just to get money today, it is to get obedience tomorrow. Now bring in global debt. By 2026, global debt is well above $300 trillion. That is not a slogan. That is a scale of leverage that forces governments and institutions to keep refinancing. Refinancing means interest payments keep happening. Interest payments keep creating winners and losers. If you are a household with low assets, higher rates are a choke point. If you are an institution with access to capital, rates can be a profit engine. If you are a government, rates can become political pressure. And when political pressure grows, narratives become weapons. Persuasion decides whose suffering is considered acceptable. Pattern interrupt. Notice how the language changes depending on who benefits. When the economy is strong, you hear resilience. When it is weak, you hear adjustment. When wages lag, you hear labor market mismatch. When housing is unaffordable, you hear temporary conditions even as decades of affordability problems accumulate. It is always a story that keeps you from naming the mechanism. And the mechanism, in plain English, is control of capital. Now let's talk about crypto, because the crypto promise was freedom from the old gatekeepers. But in 2026, the gatekeepers are inside the story. Crypto was sold as decentralized power. It was sold as escaping banks. It was sold as you controlling your financial future with a wallet and a password. Then regulation matured, institutional money moved in, compliance became mandatory, liquidity became concentrated, and many of the freedom platforms ended up relying on the same institutional rails they claimed to escape. Banks and large financial institutions gained exposure to crypto through custody, partnerships, and regulated products. Retail investors did not disappear, but they stopped being the main character. Their risk remained, their returns became uncertain, and their influence weakened. That is persuasion too. It is the persuasion that you can opt out of the financial system simply by switching your tools. But tools do not override ownership. Whoever controls rails controls outcomes. Cliffhanger into the next part, and now we arrive at the most painful part of the entire message, because persuasion is not just something that sellers do to you. Persuasion is also something you do to yourself, and it determines how you spend your money, how you vote, and how you handle fear. When you are scared of falling behind, you accept shortcuts. When you are scared of being ordinary, you chase flashy strategies. When you are scared of being trapped, you buy into narratives that claim to remove risk. But risk does not vanish. Risk just moves. In the Persuasion manual, there is a concept that sounds mystical but functions like psychology. It says people have different internal temperaments. It says you should not treat them all the same. And it says you should watch reactions rather than speeches. Modern finance translates this into behavioral observation. Not everyone will react to the same message. Some people will respond to fear. Some will respond to identity. Some will respond to status. That is why scams are increasingly personalized. It is also why legitimate services often use similar tactics. The difference is intent, not technique.